Good evening, everyone. I am live here tonight with Tyler Engelberg. He is a fellow Saskatchewaner. I don't know if any of my fellow Saskatchewan residents like that term or not, but he is a fellow Saskatchewaner, fellow YouTuber, fellow People's Party of Canada member, and I'm happy to have him here. We've met a couple of times in person. We have some interesting family connections through his wife, so I'm going to let Tyler take it away, tell me a bit about himself, and just kind of how he got into politics and YouTube.
Right on. Thanks for that introduction, Kelly. As she said, I'm Tyler Engelberg. Yeah, I'm just, I've got into politics in the last couple of years here. I was kind of the typical apathetic Canadian who would tune into an election a month before and kind of compare platforms. It didn't really matter. I was always voting Conservative because I'm from Saskatchewan, and that's kind of the mentality of a Saskatchewanian or a Saskatchewaner, as Kelly said, which I have no objection to being called a Saskatchewaner. But yeah, I was a Stephen Harper voter in 2 federal elections. And then kind of after this 2015 election, it was kind of an internal struggle for me to vote Harper in 2015 just because of some things like Bill C-51 really kind of ticked me off. And for people that are unfamiliar, that was kind of a terrorism act thing where it stripped a lot of rights for anybody. The right to fair trial and stuff like that the government deemed was I guess eligible to be deemed as a terrorist, which was a whole nother kind of thing. Anyways, the Harper Conservatives kind of ticked me off, so I started looking for other solutions. Found quite a few like-minded individuals. It was actually my brother that kind of steered me into pretty hard into the libertarian aspects of politics, and I kind of found a home there for a little while. But for, I mean, people who are familiar with libertarians, it covers a super huge spectrum of kind of misfit fringe people, I guess is a nicer way of putting it. And I got along with a lot of them, didn't get along with probably more of them. And then yeah, then Max split off from the Conservatives, and here I am. He basically took everything I liked about conservatism and everything I liked about libertarianism, smashed it together to into a party, and now I'm a big supporter. Got involved heavily with the party. Ended up getting nominated and elected as the EDA president for Moose Jaw Lake Center Lanigan, and I'm on the ground running, doing what I can to support the party.
Sorry, apparently I double hit that microphone button. Thank you so much for the intro here, Tyler. Thanks for telling us a bit about your history. I always find it interesting to hear about people that come to the PPC because it seems to be quite an interesting conglomeration of people. We all have very similar values, generally speaking. There's been some interesting fringe candidates, not candidates, but people that have kind of come out of the woodwork that I'm sure we can talk about this evening. But generally, it doesn't necessarily mean we all voted the same. I used to be a Liberal voter. I'm sorry to anyone that's new to my channel that didn't know that. Please don't, take it out on me too hard. I'm paying penance now. But if you don't mind elaborating a bit more, what made you decide to become a YouTuber? Was it because of the PPC, or is it something you've been thinking about for a while, or is it something like a call of duty for you, essentially?
Honestly, I've always been kind of a content creator. I have 2 other YouTube channels. I'm not going to get into it on here. They both kind of flamed without any success at all. But I started recording motorcycle trips and stuff like that, just doing motorcycle related stuff. It was an awesome project that I really enjoyed doing, but it didn't go anywhere, which I never really expected it to. And then I started a video gaming channel. I'm a bit of an avid video game enthusiast, so I started recording some of my video game time. And again, that kind of petered out. So I was kind of, set up to do it. And I noticed that with the PPC, there was a lot of information that was needing an avenue to people to consume, I suppose. There was, with this new party, I think one of the biggest key things with starting a new party and getting it off the ground is just getting information out to people and getting people to know the platform, the people involved, the policies involved, and kind of basically what I wanted to do is start just by talking about the PPC's platform and kind of getting some of their policies a little bit more well known. So I started doing some videos, and it wasn't so much the social media feedback that kept me going. It was just every day I'd run into somebody, and it was people that knew I was doing it. It's not like a fame thing. It was just people saying, "Hey man, watching your videos, love what you have to say. Even if I don't disagree with you, It's super awesome what you're doing. You're trying to make a better future, and it was awesome hearing that just about every day from normal people in my life, and it made me want to keep doing it. So that's where I'm at right now, and I'm enjoying every minute of it. I love this stuff. So yeah.
Nice. No, that's awesome to hear, and that's something. Tyler was the one, so we'll get into this a bit. I don't know if it'll be right away, but of course, there's a big issue here in Canada with the UN Global Compact for Migration. So Tyler was the one that was kind enough to coordinate our little rally that we had here on Saturday in Saskatoon. I think there's going to be one every week coming up here. I think I'm stuck at work for a few weekends, but it seems like there is that one thing in common. It's this sense that there's something wrong in Canada, that something is going awry, and a lot of people are too asleep or apathetic or just trusting, I think, of the government to realize how dangerous and how slippery this slope is. And so when it comes to Maxime Bernier, of course, he was the first one that brought attention to all of this. Now, this conversation that we're getting into right now, if you're not Canadian, if you're not aware of the political landscape here, there's two parties essentially right now that have been accused of, well, the new party, the new grassroots party, Maxime Bernier's People's Party of Canada, has been accused of splitting, a lot of contention. And with this global compact for migration, Maxime has stood out against it since the beginning. He was the one that headed up and sponsored the big petition against it. And there's a lot of accusation against Scheer and the CPC for not kind of diving in. So this is something I don't get into on my channel because I want to respect partisanship and just talk about conservative values. So because I've got Tyler here, I think he had an interesting day with this whole concept. So I'd like to get him to chat a bit more about what's going on between us and the CPC. And if it gets into the GCM stuff, so be it.
That was a whole lot to talk about there, but I'll try to kind of grab something in there. Yeah, you'd mentioned the yellow vest thing. I'll start with that. Basically, I saw what was happening in France, and it was really inspiring. Like you said, I think a lot of Canadians recognize that there's something very wrong within the way that we're governed, and it's truly sad that our government is kind of just pushing its own agenda and ignoring what voters, what their electorate, what taxpayers want. And I kind of sum it up as a big disrespect to us as taxpayers, as voters. And it seems that Justin Trudeau and the Liberals have kind of just taken off running in a direction that a lot of Canadians don't support. And I would go as far as to say the majority of Canadians don't support. And you know, how I've come to that conclusion is a lot of anyways, it's not necessarily founded that I can offer a great deal of evidence, but just from what I'm seeing on social media, from what I'm seeing in just general displeasure with the government, I know we're a little bit isolated in Saskatchewan. It's more of a conservative mentality, but it's just everybody you talk to is just mad at the government. They're mad at Trudeau. They're mad at the Liberals, and that's kind of where I saw what was going on in France, and I said, you know, they're obviously pretty ticked off too. And I decided to just organize a Yellow Vest event. And it just so happened that there was, you know, after I made the decision to organize the Saskatoon event, all these events started popping out of the woodworks. Not that I'm saying my organizing the one event. I think it was just coincidence. And it's turning into something huge in Canada like it did in France. I think as the weeks progress, we're going to start seeing more and more people willing to come out and denounce their government and make demands as to what we want to see as a more accountable government, a government that pays attention to us. And I never got into it because I want violent riots like in France, but I like to bring it back to the nonviolent protesters in France. And those are the people that I stand with. And I think those are the people that a lot of Canadians stand with. We don't want to turn our country upside down. We don't want to damage anybody's property. We just want to get out there, be heard, and hopefully influence our government to make some better choices that are more representative of Canadians.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I do apologize for overloading you with questions. These things all run together, but they are each very individual, nuanced topics. So the thing with the GCM, I mean, I agree with you. It wasn't decided by Canadians. We didn't really hear about it, even though our government knew about it for so long. But what's amazing to me is there are a few people that are thinking that we're conspiracy theorists. Fine, no problem. I had someone on Twitter send me a piece of the compact and say, see, there's no problem. And right within that piece, was the part about sensitizing and educating our media. And all I could say to him was, if you don't see this as a problem, I don't think we can even discuss anything, because I don't understand where you're coming from. And when it comes to that element of it, it seems like people are either in denial or not willing to look at the facts. But I know that our protest was very much peaceful. I think there was some rumblings of some Antifa and whatnot going on. Do you know much about that in the East there?
The Antifa thing, I'm not sure. Because I was the organizer, I got quite a few messages that some were not very tasteful, that didn't spook me, but I just wanted to be ready. And I think I put out a post that said, we might be experiencing some counter protests, which never ended up happening, thankfully. And that's the thing. I don't think we're really protesting anything that demands counter protest, unless you're buying into this conspiracy theorist thing. It's what we're protesting isn't a conspiracy theory. I mean, the evidence is all out there, but the biggest hurdle that people have to get over is that the media will call it a conspiracy theory. Like there's enough of that rhetoric out there that is unfounded, that it's going to be a big hurdle for a lot of the run-of-the-mill people in our society to get over that. They hear conspiracy theory, they run away as fast as they can, and that's the thing. This is all like, you can fact check anything about the compact, and it goes back to what you say, where somebody sends you something and they say, oh, well, it's all fine, there's nothing sinister here, but it's usually a little bit shrouded, and it's a little bit colluded. Like the compact will say that Canada remains sovereign and blah 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 blah, and they can make their own migration laws and et cetera, et cetera. And then right at the bottom it'll say within conformity to international law, and they keep that's something that comes up through the compact, like a lot of times, where it's in accordance with international law, subject to international law, et cetera, et cetera. And when you start making when you start looking at wording like that, that's when my hackles go up, and that's when red flags start flying. And then people love using this whole non-binding argument. And it might be non-binding now, but this is a structure, and it's going to influence laws. Soft laws become hard laws, and the government sneaks it in, just like they snuck in this migration compact. If you're not totally in tune with politics, like Kelly or myself, a lot of people are just hearing about this now, which is sad, because this has been on the books for months. There's been politicians like Maxime Bernier who came out against this months ago with a petition. And I don't think the Conservative Party did anybody any favors by trying to backburner this and shrug away from it as a way to avoid controversy, because now people are being blindsided by this when it's too late. The compact is signed, and Canadians didn't get a say because we rely on our opposition. I don't think it's any surprise to anybody that our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau likes to sneak stuff in through the cracks, likes to sneak stuff in without alerting people. But it's the opposition's job to make us aware of these policies that are trying to be passed under our nose and behind closed scenes. So I think there's a lot to this, and I think the opposition is at fault. I mean, obviously Justin Trudeau is at fault. The UN has this big agenda, and it's just it all reeks of sneakiness and all that, and that's not what we expect from our government. And I think people are sick of it. People are sick of learning about stuff a day before something is signed, or not that a lot of people check up on bills, but I mean, like, there's been times where I've heard that a bill was voted on, and then I go actually look what's in that bill, and it was totally not, like, nobody was aware. And I don't even know if some MPs are aware of some of the stuff that they're voting for. And it's very sneaky, and I think it's a big portion of what people are sick of.
Yeah, it's all of a sudden, bam, by the way, here's a huge voting reform bill, like that recent one. No one heard about it until it was pretty much pushed through. It's like this isn't a democracy, right? You don't vote on anything except this one person who essentially now has become, in a very soft-looking way. The irony of it with Canada is people think that we're so free and it's all so kosher here. We have someone acting like a straight-up dictator. He has this majority government. He can do and say what he wants, and we can't seem to do anything with it. And immediately we're finding out, okay, bam, he's got this down. He's taken this road. He's done this policy. I can't even imagine how many things he's put through without literally any say from anyone. And when you talk about the opposition, like you said, you expect it from the person in power. If you're a conservative, you expect it from Trudeau. When it comes to the opposition, I assume you're talking about Michelle Rempel, who I'm assuming perhaps you're talking about that. Wouldn't mind getting your opinion on her, because that seems to be quite
I didn't quite catch the end of that, but I think I kind of got what you're driving at. I just, the last thing I heard you say was Michelle Rempel, and yeah, I feel like she was very complacent in where this compact went and why people didn't know about it. I mean, I follow Michelle Rempel quite adamantly, as do a lot of others, but she kind of took the Conservative Party through 4 stages with this whole compact thing. Her first act, and she's the shadow immigration minister for the Conservative Party, anyways. But she went the route where it was kind of like, oh, it's no big deal. It's nothing worth worrying about. And then people kind of started to put their ears up and learn that it might be something to worry about. And then she was playing the non-binding card. She was going, well, it's non-binding, so it doesn't really matter. And she was still kind of dismissing it. And she does YouTube videos as well. Some of them are very interesting. Some of them make me want to punch myself. But so it was dismiss, and then it was the non-binding thing, dismiss again, and then they decided that they were going to study it. And that didn't last very long before there was a uproar. At the same time that they were supposedly studying it, I was watching Q&As with Andrew Scheer and stuff, and you couldn't make it more than 10 seconds without somebody in the chat saying, UN compact, what are we going to do about the UN? What are we going to do about the UN? And I saw this go on for 2 or 3 days while they were supposedly forming a study and studying this compact. And it was very evident to Andrew Scheer and to Michelle Rempel that people were not on board with this. People didn't know enough about it, which, I mean, good on them for wanting to study it. They just should have done it in October, not a week before Trudeau was going to sign this. So people started to really reject this. And then finally, first Michelle Rempel started denouncing it, and then that didn't quite ease people's worries. So then Andrew Scheer had to come out and speak about it. And I can kind of understand why he was hesitant to speak out on it, because of course the Liberals and the media totally turned this on him, and they're calling him a conspiracy theorist now, when nothing that he's saying is conspiracy theory. It's just he found his voice too late. He finally came out and said, good, we should denounce this, which I thank him for. That should have been his job months ago, like I said. And now everybody, the media and the government's turned on him, and they're really turning this into kind of a joke and downplaying it, and it's very dishonest on the government's part, and it's dishonest and disrespectful to Canadians as taxpayers and as voters.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I do apologize out there, by the way, just as some housekeeping. Few little minor tech glitches. Tyler's in a very small town, has some, I guess, varying internet speeds, and I have a computer that wants to crash every second of the day. So we're doing the best that we can with what we have. So thank you guys for your patience. If there's lag and whatnot, please keep me posted in the chat if anything goes awry. So quick question for you, Tyler, that probably isn't quick because it's a loaded question. Do you believe that the CPC, Andrew Scheer, do you believe that they are as globalist essentially as the Liberals, or do you think that they just missed this one? Because that seems to be a big debate.
Well, it's tough to put a degree on globalism. I believe that the CPC is to some aspect advocating for globalism. I mean, this was set up with the UN Agenda 21 and the UN Agenda 2030 that were both voted on, and Canada adopted under a Harper government. So I mean, to say that they're not globalist in any sense, I think is very naive. And I've heard a lot of CPC voters say, "Oh, well, it's to get everybody off Harper's back and the Liberals to deal with this." Well, I mean, I'm not buying that. There's just been too much, and if that is true, I mean, that's a ridiculous way to do politics. But we've seen a lot of globalist policies supported by the Conservative Party of Canada. Like I said, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, the Paris Accord was voted on unanimously by the Conservative Party, aside from a couple MPs who were were like punished because of it. Like you saw Brad Trost and what's her name? I think it's Cheryl Gallant or something, and Maxime Bernier, who didn't vote. And since then, the party they ran a candidate against Trost. They ran a candidate against, they've punished them and tried to remove their chances of getting elected again, just for going against the party on this one issue that I think Canadians will end up vindicating. I think at the end of this, Canadians will be denouncing this in force. I think Canadians are starting to wake up, and yeah. So I guess to zone back directly onto your question, yes, I think the Conservative Party is globalist. These politicians know what's going on. Andrew Scheer has known about this compact. Michelle Rempel has known about this compact, and I think part of it is they just don't want to face the battle of being called every name that the media can think of and the Trudeau can think of in the House of Commons for being against something like this. Because if you disagree with Trudeau, you're a racist and you're a xenophobe and you're a misogynist and you're all these words that don't represent who these people are that he's calling these things to. So I get that they don't want to deal with the backlash, but it's their job. So I mean, there's a lot at play here. Yes, I think they're globalist. Yes, I think they don't want to deal with the backlash. And I think that this whole coming late to the party and denouncing the compact days before it was signed is kind of their way of virtue signaling to voters to say, we're with you. And it's a reaction to backlash. I talk about this quite a bit, where the Conservative Party, they're hard on the gas to the left, and it seems like they push and they push and they push to the left to try to adopt that center left to get the voters and stuff like that. And then there's backlash, and when there's backlash, they put it in reverse just for a quick second, and then they just kind of take a minute. And I'm really worried that if they do get into power, they're not going to take their foot off the gas. They're not going to put it in reverse. They're not going to do anything. They're just going to, they got 4 years to do what they want, and that really terrifies me if they do get into power.
Well, when you think about it, really, politics are people. So when I think of all this, I'm actually going to throw my video off here because I think I'm having some lag there. Sorry, guys. I hope that's all right. So when you think about it with a person, if they're not willing to stand for anything, then they fall for anything, right? When it comes to a political party, if it's all about vote pandering, it's very hard to trust them because, like you said, how do you know that they're actually speaking out about something based on principle? Or are they just speaking out on something because they feel like, oh, this is going to get this group that we're losing. Hurry up, we're losing this group. And how do you please everyone enough to keep the votes? And that's what I'm seeing with the CPC. And I see a lot of arguments. I know if you are in the Twitter world, which I regret sometimes that I am, Manny Ottawa and Frank Vaughan go at each other every day about this. And it really comes down to ultimately who is the more principled. It's Maxime Bernier, egotistical and selfish, and all of us are uncaring for Canada, or is it that we're trying to fight for what we believe is the true Conservative Party, the principled alternative, as Maxime would say? So I assume we agree on this, that Maxime is the principled alternative, and this all comes back to the PPC. I guess if you want to elaborate a little bit on kind of, I guess, the PPC when it comes to you discussing this with other CPC members. I've seen this come up with you. You have a good way of getting around it all. What are your tactics when you speak to people? Do you find that this is the fight, or is it about Max's personality? What part of the CPC are people holding on to, I guess, is the question, in your opinion?
I think the biggest thing that they're holding on to is the tribal mentality. They've been conservative for so long. Like a lot of these people, yeah, and I don't really want to start categorizing people, but like, you get these middle-aged people who have been voting age for 30 or 40 years, and it's what they voted because it's always been the best choice that they've had, and it becomes tribal. So when even if you're given, people are stubborn, even if you're given, totally great other options that are evidently better based on evidence, fact, everything like that, it's a hard pill to swallow when you have to necessarily admit that you're wrong, and what you thought was right is wrong, and that's something that people don't handle very well. People are adverse to change, and people are really adverse to admitting that they're wrong. So I think that's a huge part of it. I think that that it's pretty evident that Bernier, in my mind, that he's the principal option for sure. And I mean, like you look at things like the CPC leadership race. If he wanted to be the next prime minister, all he had to do was give up on supply management. That would have easily got him the vote. That would have, easily put him in line to be the next prime minister. I think if Maxime Bernier was leading the Conservative Party right now, they would crush Trudeau by a landslide. So that right there is evidence of his principle to me. But by him saying, I will not give up on this thing that seems quite inconsequential to a lot of people, but I refuse to give up on it because I don't think it's what's best for Canadians. I want to do what's best for Canadians. I'm going to stand on my principle, even if it costs me the leadership election. And then the people who say he left because it's sour grapes and all this, like you look at what happened after the leadership election, where he went cap and this is my understanding of everything. Like I've done a lot of research on this. I wasn't there. I don't know that this is all how it went down. This is my understanding of it. But he went cap in hand to Andrew Scheer and said, look, you beat me by 1%. There's obviously conservative members that want policies from my platform, that want policies from your platform. So let's come together and let's come up with a platform. And and I mean, this is him being nice, being not sour grapes at all, just kind of saying, hey, let's figure this out. Let's do what's best for our membership. Let's do what's best for Canada. And Andrew Scheer kind of looked at him and said, like, no, we're not using any of your stuff. So that's kind of a pretty big slap in the face to a guy that represents, roughly half of your membership, to just look at him and say, well, the people that supported you, they don't get a say. And I mean, that would be enough for me to leave the party right then and there. But no, Bernier sat there and he said, I'm going to be a team player. I believe in the party. I believe in this and that. For a year, like he sat there trying to influence the party in a positive direction, based on what his voting members had told him to do. Like he had a ton of support, so he was doing what he thought was right. It was rejected by Scheer. It wasn't rejected by the party. I mean, it was. So yeah. Anyways, I think Scheer handled that very poorly. I think it's a lot of evidence that Bernier is the principal choice, and he just decided that there was too much corruption. There wasn't enough working together. He wasn't the one not being a team player. I think it was Scheer, and he couldn't deal with it. He couldn't deal with being silenced. And I mean, you can call that his ego. I call that his drive for helping Canadians. So I mean, when the party treated him the way that he did, when Andrew Scheer treated him the way that he did, I don't blame him for leaving at all. Frankly, I would have done it a lot sooner. To start a party and have the ambitious goals that he is, I don't know. I've had a lot of opportunity for FaceTime with Bernier, and sitting down for lunch with him and everything, and talking to him when he's 2 feet away and getting to answer him questions. There's just an honesty about him when you're speaking to him frankly, directly, and candidly. And I hear a lot of these accusations thrown at him, and I think they're out of fear. The conservative votes see that they're being threatened by a more principled, better platform, and they get tribal and defensive and lash out. And you start seeing things like today, somebody edited a video totally out of context and made it seem like Maxime Bernier is somehow calling for more equalization and more equalization payments to Quebec. And I mean, if you've ever heard the guy speak ever, like that's totally against what he wants to do. And it's getting really petty. And you see Manny and Frank and not that I'm calling them petty, but it's very detrimental to unity and everything like that. And it's getting pretty cutthroat. And it's getting to the point of misinformation is being purveyed over truth, because people want to be right instead of they want to be right more than they want to be honest. And it's kind of sad how it's going down.
It's unfortunate I don't have a video feed, because I'm just sitting here emphatically nodding because I agree so wholeheartedly with what you're saying, particularly when it comes to that tribalism, right? And people holding on just to a certain belief. And when you said that I didn't see that video. Yeah, that's ridiculous. Maxime is so absolutely blatantly anti-equalization. It's all he talks about, other than, of course, the dairy cartel. So I mean, yeah, every rally you go to, like you said, I've had the opportunity now to meet him twice, and he's warm and kind and, dare I say, a human being and not a robot, as so many politicians seem to be. He refreshes his speeches for every place he goes. He even took our advice as lowly members at the lunch to shift how he said some things. If you notice that in his later speech, he's extremely humble. I find it almost laughable when people are throwing out these insults, but I guess, I look at it almost sometimes, and I don't mean to be rude. I get where the CPCers are coming from. The vote split is huge and it's valid. I get the concern, but there's so many NPC arguments. There's like 4 or 5 that just keep coming up over, and they just cycle through them. And slowly but surely, each one gets debunked. But I find that it's honestly kind of exhausting. I can't even engage online because that kind of stuff it's so frustrating and so childish. And we're all technically on the same team. And I find that there's nobody who's striving for unity. Everyone's just trying to fight. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to chat with you, because you don't seem to want to fight. You want to talk, right?
Well, I think I don't want to fight with people, but truth needs to be defended. So I guess I value truth more than being right. A lot of people fight, and they fight with ad hominem, and they fight with insults, and they fight. It's this dehumanization of the enemy, and that's not what I'm about. And oftentimes, if I'm attacked like that, I'll kind of just say, okay, if that's how you want to be, we obviously can't continue having a constructive debate. But I live for debate because I believe that truth will only be shown through debate. And I mean, I get into this a lot. I'll be out with some friends, and I'll disagree with somebody politically, and we'll start debating, and it never gets nasty. And if it does, I shut it down right away. But I like that. I like debating people, and a lot to hear where they're coming from and why they think the way that they do, and hopefully to convince them of the truth. And it's frustrating sometimes because people don't really want to hear the truth. They want to be right, and that's where debate goes to die. And I've kind of talked my way away from what I forget the question that you asked me was.
You answered it. You're all good. You're all good. No, it's just more of, I guess, me making a comment on it all. Sometimes it's more frustrating. It's just nice to find like-minded people that, like you said, debate is one thing, but to have productive discussion as opposed to just essentially slinging shit. That's what I see. I've been called a cult member. I've been called stupid, ignorant. Oh God, there's so many words. Whiny baby. Like, there's a lot of words that have been thrown at the PPCers. And I have heard through, there's a gal named Jilly Brains. I think she goes by a different name. She does YouTube commentary also. And she's someone who stayed with the CPC. And we have a plan in the new year to do kind of some unifying work to try to just make like a handbook of conservative values, because people are getting really tribal and partisan as opposed to focusing on trying to get the liberal people to maybe think differently or more openly. So do you take time on Twitter to chat with liberals as well, or do you just deal with them as they come to you? That's what I'm always curious. Is Twitter an echo chamber for other people? What do people use it for? Because I think I use it strangely.
I find it really hard to find anybody that's truly liberal. I mean, I'll engage when they want to, but there's some interesting things that I've found. It's hard to find them. Maybe it's because we're from Saskatchewan and when I do find them and it seems like things are going well and there could be some sort of debate, it usually degrades to name calling and shit slinging, as you said. So and I blame our government for it. Like, you look at what he does when somebody disagrees with him. He won't humor them by discussing why there's a disagreement, discussing the virtues and the principles behind the way the people think that the way they do. He immediately resorts to name calling, and it vindicates it for people. Like, I mean, if you can see our prime minister calling anybody that disagrees with irresponsible immigration to be a racist, it normalizes it for anybody. And then all of a sudden, with this whole yellow vest thing, some of the stuff in my inbox isn't very nice at all. I mean, I've been called all kinds of stuff, and it was almost enough for me to not get involved. I posted the event, and I tried to do it in a way that I wasn't happy with. I was trying to avoid talking about immigration and stuff like that. And I was trying to steer just to government accountability. And I had a couple of my friends said, okay, man, if you're going to get behind this yellow vest thing, you actually have to tell people what it's about in a more direct fashion. And it ended up kind of being an internal struggle for me and an epiphany. I didn't want to deal with being called a white supremacist. I didn't want to be called a racist. And in my heart, I knew it wasn't true, but I knew it was going to happen because that's the rhetoric. If somebody disagrees with anything to do with it's not even immigration, it's migration. If you disagree with migration, if you disagree with open borders, you're a white supremacist, racist, yada yada yada. And like I said, it's coming top down. The fish starts rotting at the head. It's coming from Trudeau, and when he normalizes it totally degrades any debate. It degrades conversation to dehumanizing the enemy, and that's when discourse falls apart.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And of course, with Trudeau bringing this out and about, of course, our media does this as well. I can't believe how much I see. Well, I can believe it, but every once in a while, it still blows my mind. Whether it's CBC, Globe and Mail, I mean, Maclean's is bought and paid for. You can tell these constant little, inklings of reminding us all how terrible we really are deep down. This insidiousness of our racist nature, apparently. And what's really scary is, there's people like yourself or myself, Tyler, that are genuinely just nice, regular Canadian folks, and we are getting called these insane names. And it's funny because when I started this channel, I didn't realize how vile the comments would be. And I mean, you just have to essentially take them, you move on. But like you said, it's not easy. And I think that really deters a lot of people. For me, I've been through some hell in my life that there's very little anyone can say that actually is going to matter compared to the things I've survived. So screw them. But there's people that do have jobs to worry about, and they're in situations or neighborhoods where they're going to be ousted and isolated. Look, in the States, you have people divorcing their spouses. You have children disowning their parents over being Trumpers. There's all kinds of division, and it's really not getting us anywhere at all, right?
No, it's absolutely just getting us divided. It's separating us into little groups, and I mean, without going too far down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole, but it's just the way the government wants us. Like if we're not united as Canadians, we don't have a united voice, and we have no leg to stand on when trying to influence government policies. When I'm white and you're black and you're this color and everything like that, or I'm a man and you're a woman, or I'm straight and you're gay, and it's just dividing everybody, and then it's pitting everybody against each other, and it's identity politics, and it's poison. And I don't know, somehow we need to get past that. And this is where I see a couple inspiring things with what I'm involved in. The PPC has been inspiring to me, being that you're not a liberal, you're not a conservative, you're part of a new party, and that's what matters. You're coming from the liberal team, not a team, but I mean you're a past liberal, I'm a past libertarian. There's NDPers, there's Green Party voters, there's people who've never voted, and they're coming together and saying, like you said, these are the principles that we believe in, and that's what we have in common, and we all want what's best. We don't want to do bad onto these other groups that the government's trying to split us into with legislation and that kind of thing. So I really like that the PPC is uniting people of, sometimes I consider politics to be like a religion. So I would say the PPC is uniting people of all faiths to come together for the greater good. And then and same thing with the yellow vests. It's a theme, and the dissatisfaction with our government is uniting people. And I heard a friend of mine, Mark Friesen, say it best. He said, Trudeau is inspiring to me. Definitely not in a good way, but he's inspiring me, and he's inspiring a lot of people to stand up, and that's really a bad thing that a government is inspiring people in such a way, but it's happening nonetheless.
It's funny. I remember him saying that at the rally, like how inspired he was, and we all chuckled. And it's true. He brings out this sense of, holy cow, this is what we're going to turn into if we don't take back our country. And of course, that doesn't mean anything violent, but it's amazing when you start to hear someone. I think we've taken Canada for granted. I know I did. Just when you hear someone call us a post-national state, when you hear someone say we have no core identity, there's something in that just makes me feel sick. And it goes into so many different facets, and I find it really interesting. Tyler and I have joked that I do a preamble now when I sing the Canadian anthem because, of course, I refuse to pander to feminists and I won't sing the newest version. I know there's been several changes, but I will not pander to this change. And I always just say right at the beginning, hey guys, I'm going to sing the one I learned as a kid. And people just burst into like explosive like happiness and clapping and they're cheering and whooping. And nobody wants this crap. Everybody wants to be Canadian. And that's what the PPC is for me. When I go to a rally, it's different races, different backgrounds. People come that are like in wheelchairs that are there just to be a part of it because they believe in our core tenets, you know, personal responsibility and freedom and patriotism. And somehow even our own media and our own fellow countrymen would rather call us racist than just be a part of something that I think is so beautiful. That to me, it's not insulting personally, but I find it so sad that this is where we're at. Like you said, our own government encouraging us to turn on each other. And I do think there's a manipulative plan to all this. I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but there is. It's so evident, right?
It's absolutely evident, and it's just like I said, with all this legislation that's coming out that is specifically dividing people. You don't hear a law being passed right now that says Canadians. It says, you know, LGBTQ community or women or you know, it's just very divisive. And yeah, it's really sad that this is coming from our government. He goes to, you know, like G20 summits and talks about how construction workers are causing negative impacts on communities, and we all know what he's implying, and there's just no evidence to support it. Like when we need a gender study, some whatever that even is, a gender impact study before a construction crew can go in and fix a pipe for a community that has no water or something like that, and yet we can just open our borders right up to whoever and whatever without actually studying the impact of that. It really shows me that there's an agenda there.
Oh, absolutely. And this is something that I've considered the theme of my channel, why I started it. Because when I was a liberal, but it wasn't so much, as for many, it wasn't political, it was social. It was just how I was living. I was very liberal in my existence. You know, I actually voted Harper the first time as well when I was, 18, 19. I, came from a conservative family, but in my 20s, I left all of that behind. And I believed that I was doing the empathetic, compassionate thing. And then you realize that this is all just misguided empathy or weaponized empathy or excuses and essentially guises of empathy. And then you just get mad that someone used your heart to do something that's actually in its core kind of evil. And I feel like what's happening, especially Marissa Shen, that was a big eye opener. Lots of red pill moments this year, but Marissa Shen's death and his callousness, Trudeau's callousness was just, it still gets me to this day, that complete glazed over dead look in his eyes, and yet tears for every little other thing, and billions of dollars for gender research and everything else. And like you said, we're going to call out our construction workers, some of the blue collar, salt of the earth, are these hardworking people in Canada, and so many people in Saskatchewan and Alberta have been working in construction or other industries that are just so insulted. And I can't believe people even are arguing this. Like it's really sick. Like he's very anti-West, put it that way. And it seems like he's just anti-Canadian. I don't know what else to say.
No, and I agree with you. And it's very troubling when we see the media portray what he's doing. And I like to think about these things. I'd really like to see how people react to some of the stuff that he does with zero media involvement. Like because a lot of people, the apathetic voters, they hear something and then they have to wait for a response before they come up with their own response, because they're not sure how to feel because they haven't been told how to feel. And you get the media spin on it. You read an article and you're like, oh no, that was okay because of this, that, and the other thing. When there's people who care about who form an opinion without that kind of thing, and they're sitting there kind of scratching their head going, did he actually just do that? And it creates a back and forth. But it goes back to the media and how they can't do no wrong. Our government can't do any wrong, and you get the odd independent media person out there that'll call out our government and on their ridiculousness. But we're basically left to social media and sharing in this peer-to-peer network to get real news and real platforms like YouTube and Facebook, and even they're getting to be so censored that when I hear something, when I read something, when I see something, I'm always scared to share it or that before I spend a good 20 minutes sourcing everything and citing everything. And that's journalism. That's what journalists are supposed to be doing for us. So it's super frustrating in the sense that the journalism is dead. And no matter where you get your news from, you can't trust it. You have to do your own research on everything, and it's very disheartening.
So are you suggesting that there is some fake news out there? Oh, very Trumpian of you. Yeah, it's gross. And what's grossest in Canada, and I don't think people in the States, people compare it to CNN, like CBC, CNN, and not even close. We pay for this garbage, and that is what is so frustrating. It's just, and now, of course, with this new like $595 million essentially payout. I mean, it's just, there's so much propaganda, and when you tell someone that, and it makes you sound like a conspiracy, get real. Have you ever read this shit? Like, it's just, I find it, to be honest, not only it's an insult. I think they think we're all a bunch of monkeys, but sadly, people say, oh, no one watches the CBC anyway. I wish that were true. Maybe conservatives don't watch it, but that's the go-to for, like you said, Tyler, just the run-of-the-mill average person, running their kids to the hockey game, going to work, grabbing a coffee. They might read a quick article, whatever comes up on Facebook. And like you said, no one's sourcing it. For me, CBC, it was the Colton Boushie, Gerald Stanley thing, which of course was huge in Saskatchewan. They literally are still, to this day, printing actual material facts that are wrong, that are false, not just biased, completely false, things that came out in the trial. That was my first indication that absolutely no matter what, this stuff is corrupt. And that was last year before I even officially, I guess you'd say, red pilled, so to speak. It's really sick. It's just a big lie. And when you see it and you can't convince other people of it, it's like I have family and friends that just don't get it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll hop on this CBC bashing epiphany thing where there was this actually recently came up. This is quite a few years ago, but it started circulating again. The CBC took out an ad. I don't know if it was internally or what, but I saw this and it's been confirmed. I did a lot of research to confirm it. They put out an ad looking for a television show host. It was a children's television show, and they said the ad was basically saying looking for somebody between the age of whatever 18 and 25, upbeat, yada yada, any race but Caucasian. And this is what we're paying for. This is our tax dollars paying for blatant racism, blatant discrimination. That is the definition of discrimination. And I'm not even going to get into the whole it's okay to discriminate against white people thing but this is the CBC discriminating in their hiring policies, and that they ended up taking the ad down. But what didn't they take down? And if that's like okay for them to print, if somebody decided that was okay to print, what's going on behind those closed doors? And you get into the whole CBC thing. I mean, you look at the average CBC employee salary versus run-of-the-mill private sector employee. I mean, it's something like 33% over the average in the industry and stuff like that. And this is what we're paying for. And then on top of all that, they're overpaying them. They're discriminatory. They're just not reporting fact, like you said. It's absurd that we're paying for that. And I'll steer this back to the PPC. He's the only, Maxime Bernier and the PPC, they're the only ones talking about defunding the CBC, cut the budget, shred it, turn it upside down. If the public wants to see what the garbage that the CBC has on the air, they'll pay for it just like every other media outlet that they get. If it's worth reading, if it's worth watching, they'll pay for it. And taxpayers shouldn't have to.
Yeah, I try not to swear on my channel, but fucking A, so definitely true. I can feel the, blood pressure rising in the live chat too. Everyone's like, you fund CBC. We've always hit a nerve with the CBC. That's like the number one go-to. No matter what, you can always get people happy if you got talking about the anger towards the CBC. It's not just CBC anymore, sadly, of course. Global News seems to have gone that way. Maclean's, which really bummed me out. They used to be good. They seem to have really shifted. CTV is hit and miss. There's a few local places that are okay, but it's just all over. it's really sad to see. When you said, Tyler, you know, you do research, you spend some time. Hey, is this fake news? Is this something that's too biased or too partisan? You check it out, and we're not even getting paid for this. Like, I had to pull a video about a month ago because it turned out to be sort of a fake news story. I thought I researched it enough, I missed it, and I did just a video about intellectual honesty. And everybody joked, that's too bad this BBC doesn't have that. But it's not really funny because they're getting paid through our tax dollars, and they don't seem to feel, again, it comes back to, it's not politics, it's not a business, this is human beings. There's no ethics. If this was just a person, this would be a psychopath, a sociopath, right? And these people are trusted, and that's what scares me. As a libertarian, it must drive you nuts with the amount of faith that Canadians have in our government. They just assume it's all going to be okay, and I don't know if that's more the media fault or if it's, I mean, Trudeau is taking things really left really fast, but it seems like it's been a slippery slope for years. And when I talk to my subscribers, I hear a lot of horror stories about when I was too young to remember with the original Trudeau. And just, he really did start a hell of a slippery slope with migration and everything else, eh?
Yeah, he did, and it's hard for me to be too upset with the population in just burying their head in the sand and kind of saying that everything's going to be okay, because it takes such an effort today to be educated. It takes such an effort to fight through all this fake news. It takes such an effort to look past these decisions that the government's making to try to find that ulterior motive, to try to, especially when a lot of times, if you're an apathetic voter, they give you reasoning behind it. It's 9 out of 10 times it's total bogus, but they'll give you a reasoning that someone could somewhat reasonably accept if they're not willing to go to the extent that we are to weed through this fake news, ulterior motive, etc. So and I mean, being that I only got so adamantly involved in politics just a few short years ago, I was the same just a few short years ago. So there needs to be a bit of blame laid on the population for not fighting hard enough to weed through all this stuff. But I think the bigger blame lies on the government, lies on the media, lies on our lackluster opposition, lies on all these fights that people have to take on if they want to be in the know.
Yeah, that's just it. I can't blame the people, right? A lot of people are just, well, they're busy. They have lives. They have things going on. I've talked to family members that say, I want to get involved in politics, but I really have to dive in and I don't have the time. So they think it's all or nothing. So they just read whatever comes up on their Facebook feed. And sadly, that is a little bit frightening because you just don't know what you're going to get. Of course, there's always Russian collusion, which is the big thing everywhere, right? I don't even know. It's the media part is something that I'm so glad that Maxime is bringing up. These rallies of his, the defund the CBC. And yet, it's funny on that note, I'm sure you caught in Saskatoon, we all started booing. I think it was actually Steve, my fiance Steve, that shouted out, through the CBC. And he said, no, don't yell this time. They actually gave me a fair interview. And he didn't want to be too mad at that one journalist. Even he could be enough of an individualist and not a collectivist to say, hey, there's some good people. It's the institution that's corrupt, much like with, of course, the CPC. And it is interesting how all these topics come back to the PPC. I think we're both in this for the same reason. It's someone that's actually standing up to things that aren't popular and saying enough is enough. This is bullshit. We're not standing for it anymore. This is essentially un-Canadian and unethical, right? And Frank Vaughan and I had a conversation. First time we talked on the phone, he said he's very concerned that we're at a point in our society where a selfless act looks selfish and people can't tell the difference. And I feel like perhaps we've just been duped. And I really hope that people start to see with Maxime that he is not. I mean, the Liberals think he's a white supremacist. The CPCers think he's a vote splitting. Well, of course, there's that theory too. He's being paid by Trudeau. Have you heard that fun one? Have you had to fight anyone on that yet, by the way, as a side note?
Oh my God. Not only did I does that come up a lot, which is total ludicrous. And people will speculate when they don't have, you know how a debate goes, that somebody's losing, they just start grasping at anything, no matter how ridiculous it is. And I feel like that was one of those things that came out. I mean, who can honestly believe that he's being paid by the Liberals? And if he is, it's working out terribly for the Liberals. I mean, if I've seen a lot of evidence and polling evidence stating the not the demographic, but the proportional representation of past voters coming to the PPC. And yes, the majority of them are conservative, but another very large majority is liberals. Like they're second, and it's not a super far second. It's not working out good for them. There was even people that went as far as like really poorly photoshopping pictures of Bernier and Trudeau standing. There's a couple of them going around. One, they're wearing lederhosen, for crying in the sink, and people are like, you know, touting this like it's real, like, oh, look at this meeting that they had, and oh, they're standing in the garden in this poorly photoshopped picture where the shadows are on opposite sides of their faces, and you can just clearly see that they're poorly photoshopped, and people are touting this like it's fact. And I mean, that's where we're at. It's not that people can't see that it's poorly photoshopped. It's just that they want to believe what they're saying is right. It's wanting to be right over the truth. My blood pressure's getting up there. But yeah, it's truly disheartening, and you know, yeah, there's no way in my mind that the Trudeau paying Bernier makes any sense. And people like to bring up the fact that, oh, where did he get this $350,000, which is turned into more than that now. I haven't really heard the status of fundraising in the party in the last little while, but I think last I heard it was $400 and some thousand that the party had raised. And it's a very conservative minded party. I mean, it's full of the party is full of people who have money, people who don't have money, but there's a lot of people who are donating the maximum that they can legally, you know, that $1,500. And like, I've seen people donate that myself. Like I've seen them write down their Visa number and on a pledge form and hand it to PPC executives and stuff like that. And I mean, when you break down $400,000 by 35,000 members, it works out like $11 or $12 per member. If you're a conservative minded party pushing for conservative values and you can't raise $12 per member, and people are resorting to that being something sinister, I mean, if Bernier can't raise 10 or 12 bucks per member, he might as well quit right now, because there's no way that you can get a party off the ground without $350,000 or $400,000. It's just the absurdity. The stuff people are spewing is just blood boiling, and it's lazy. It's lazy, and that's just the way I see it.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. We've got Ben Tomlinson here in the chat, and he just mentioned, you know, a lot of people are scared of Trudeau winning again, which is always, when I try to be empathetic and understanding, that's my, you know, okay, fair enough. I always will say, I understand the stakes are high. We all want him out. I do understand your concern. But, you know, I have to say I disagree and I choose this party. And I get it. I try to, you know, and there have been people that I've been able to, I think I've converted like 2 people on Twitter, which actually felt pretty good, because that doesn't happen very often. It does feel good to be able to do that, but ultimately it comes down to intention. You can tell when someone's just barking like a scared dog, you know, like a dog in the corner that's yapping at you and snarling because they're afraid versus being aggressive. And then there's the ones that are just trying to shame you and saying ridiculous, outlandish things. Like you said, just being intellectually lazy. And I don't have a great deal of tolerance for that, so I don't do too much with them. I'm assuming this probably does happen against the CPC. I've seen some pretty nasty PPC comments too, which I don't condone. I'm, you know, all for all of us acting our age and everything, but yeah, it's kind of exhausting. A lot of random comments that are just, they're just meant to be condescending and demeaning and extremely disrespectful. They have actually no purpose whatsoever. What I do find comforting is sometimes, I know Tyler and I both chatted with a guy, it was about 2 weeks ago rather. He thought that the PPC members were a white nationalist group. And we both kind of just chatted with him gently instead of fighting with him. And it turns out he admitted later that his friend had become highly anti-Semitic around the same time he joined the PPC. He thought the two were connected. Tyler and I were able to somehow show, hey, we're normal people and we're not like that. Now he follows me on Twitter. So, I mean, you do get these people that are just scared for whatever reason. You can reason with people if you try. So I do encourage people out there to keep trying. I'm getting to the point now with like question period here. So it kind of actually dives into this. I do have someone, Jane asks, she's out in Nanaimo, I think, how can we as ordinary people promote the PPC, flyers, door to door, etc.? So I'll let you answer that one. I think you've got some ideas, probably, Tyler.
The biggest thing is, and I'm trying to remember the wording that Maxime Bernier used just because it resonated with me, is something along the lines of, uh, I'm going to butcher it, but when you're fighting for the principles that you believe in, you have to fight for them. He said it a lot more eloquently, but basically the best way to get the word out to help the party is just talk about it, and know the platform. If you believe in the party, get to know it and stay in the know. Keep your ear to the ground. Social media helps, but be ready to debate these key issues in a structural or in a beneficial way, because people aren't really coming around that easily. A lot of people are, and I think more people than is being led, is being shown, are coming around. But we have to have these debates. We have to talk about these things. We have to talk about the platform. We have to differentiate the PPC from the CPC and from the Liberals and from every other party. And past that, I mean, I'm not saying be a keyboard warrior and go and fight with everybody online, because that gets old real fast. I know that firsthand. But find out about your EDA, find out your electoral district association, find out who's running things in your riding. Touch base with them, because they'll know exactly where people are needed and what needs to be done. There's people out there door knocking. There's people out there getting in touch with people. We're kind of at a little bit of a waiting period here with some Elections Canada stuff like that. But the biggest thing is talking about it. People need to talk about stuff.
Yeah, totally agree. There's people in the West that still haven't heard of Maxime Bernier if they don't follow politics. Yeah, I agree, just completely. Just get out there, talk about it. If you're an online person, go online. Some people rock Twitter. I'm not one of them. I'm going to be talking to people in person. People are actually pretty receptive, because people, like you said, Tyler, they're frustrated right now, right? So trying to go through these questions, I have a random few that have come up all in a row here. People are very much wanting your flag, Tyler. So if you can pass on where you got one, there's like 4 people that really want and love your UN flag.
That I actually ordered the flag on Amazon, I believe, and it's just a standard UN flag. I think it was $9, and then I took a Sharpie and actually colored it all in there. The UN actually made their logo a nice, outlined in a nice circle, and the line going through it is 2/3 of the way done on each side, so it's pretty easy to do. It might have taken me 15 minutes with a Sharpie, and yeah, I'll be waving that one proudly this weekend at the Yellow Vest rally.
Nice. It's like they wanted it to happen. That's fantastic. So next question is way off topic, but I'll dive into it because it's in order and I want to be fair. That's what PPC is all about. Space Dave 2000 asks, do you guys notice most CEOs of tech companies are the nerds from the 80s or 90s? Maybe they were picked on and now getting revenge. Interesting question. I watched a Blue Collar Logic video about really far leftists that hate Trump and Republicans because they're having bad flashbacks from their bad teenage years. Any thoughts on that, Tyler?
I can't confirm or deny that. I mean, it's wildly speculative, but I mean, there's got to be some truth to that. I mean, nobody likes being picked on, and I guess if you want to kind of look at it like the high school team, or the high school mentality, Trump's popular. He's everything that I don't want to use a nerd or a geek would hate, I guess, in that school setting. So I can see it, yeah.
I always enjoy looking at the psychology of this stuff. Like, if you just look at people, I always think Trump's not like that complicated. For example, it just seems pretty easy. Stroke his ego, tell him he's the best at something, and I think you're pretty much good to go. I don't know what Chrystia Freeland's problem was. She just can't figure this guy out, I guess. Anyways, whole other story, live stream on that topic, right? I think there was one more question. This is an important question. I'm going to pronounce this wrong. Zoilar asks, or says, I'm surprised no one's making videos on the expropriation of land in South Africa. That's a good point. I actually am trying to get in touch with, I should actually probably follow that up. I'm glad you mentioned it. I do have a couple people I met, 2 South African farmers I met in a small town in Saskatchewan, in the last place I lived. I found out recently that they came here because they were escaping the violence before it got bad. So I'm hoping to do a live stream with them if they're willing to talk about it. I think it's hard to find South Africans that are feel safe enough to bring it up, but I will happily take that on. Any thoughts on that situation, Tyler?
Well, it's really sad what's happening there, and you know, uh, it's sad that they're being appropriated. It's sad that the government's behind it, and it's even more sad that I think, and I'm going to relate this back to our situation here. We've got refugees jumping over the border in Quebec. They're coming from the States. I don't think they're in trouble of being killed in the States. You know, they're maybe in threat of being deported, and justly so. But they're jumping over at Roxham Road, and Canada's saying, well, you know, here you go, here's a hotel room, check yourself in. We'll get a bellhop to take your bags up. And in the same breath, there's South African people that can't just hop over a border illegally and get here, that are applying for refugee status, that I think actually have a claim to it, that darn well our government and Mr. Trudeau are just turning the eye on because they don't fit the agenda that they're trying to pass. So I think it's even more sad there, and it makes me feel disgusted in our government that I'm paying taxes, and I believe in, and it's not about race. It's just about genuine concern and genuine claim to what refugee means, and it disgusts me.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I remember watching a couple of the documentaries. Of course, there's one Southerns that came out, and Katie Hopkins, and there's lots of, oh, this is propaganda, this is propaganda. Trump spoke about it. People said he was a racist. I mean, people are trying to say that this is fake. And the very first person I ever had a debate with on my channel was a Democrat down in the States, and he felt that all of this stuff was like basically just far right, whatever garbage. People are trying to do what they can to justify essentially white racism or whatever you want to call it. And it's really sick because in the meantime, of course, this is happening. And even just the expropriation of land on its own is kind of terrifying, let alone the horrific stuff that's going on after. It was the only time I've ever seen Katie Hopkins cry, and I follow her pretty closely, and she was absolutely wrecked hearing some of these stories. And when I spoke to these South African guys, I remember it well. I remember thinking, I started asking about their country. A while back, I was naive. I didn't know what was going on. I thought they were arrogant because they shut right down. I know now they probably just didn't want to talk about it, and it's pretty sickening. South Africans in general do integrate quite well into Canadian culture, so I don't know why we aren't reaching out to help them when we just open our borders to everyone else. But I have ideas why, but we won't get into that for tonight. I don't think I have any other major questions that are coming from the chat, but I wouldn't mind just passing it back to here, Tyler, in case there's anything you wanted to touch on that you feel we didn't get to, whether it's about your own personal story with politics. I think we could probably do another live stream sometime to follow up, but please do feel free if you want to chat about anything else that you think needs a little more meat and potatoes.
Honestly, I think we covered a wide range of topics here, and I think we covered them pretty well. So I mean, I'm kind of ready to wrap it up. Just I feel like there's probably a lot of people in the chat that already know about the PPC, that are very informed about it. If not, like, go to the website, start watching videos, hang out on YouTube, searching Bernier, searching PPC. There's lots of like the events, the rallies that he's done are all posted on his Facebook. If you can scroll through it and check out where he's done his last events. I mean, I believe in this party a lot. And I think if people were willing to kind of put the pitchforks down and give it an honest shot in a bit of a nonpartisan view, like focal, I think that there's a lot of good things that can come of this party. And same goes with the yellow vest thing. I mean, if you're mad at your government, all you got to do is go throw on a yellow vest, or even don't. Like, your participation is what's most important. Go spend a couple hours Saturday at your city hall or at your legislative building. I mean, it's worth it. You'll meet some like-minded people, and you'll fire some more people up. And and I mean, share all this stuff, likes, shares, whatever. It goes a long way. And I mean, that's where we're at. We need people to get involved more politically, involved more in holding our government accountable. We all have a voice. It all needs to be heard. So yeah, if we're done here, I'm good with that.
I'm attempting to use my video. I think I'm actually not lagging for the first time. Thought I'd at least throw some eye contact out there to say a big thank you to you, Tyler, for coming on to the channel. Happy to have you back sometime in the new year if you want to keep this conversation going. Yeah, please do, everyone. Check out Tyler's channel. He's got some great content, and he works hard at it. So please do support him and other Canadian content. I'm going to cut the video feed because it's lagging already, but I am going to keep going. Tyler, you'll still be on live after I shut this down. So to everyone who participated, thanks for being here. If I missed any questions, feel free to copy and paste them into the comment section when it's uploaded, and I will try to get to Tyler if it's for him and get back to you guys. So again, thanks for being here. Have a great evening. If I don't chat with you beforehand, Merry Christmas and not Happy Holidays. And as always, be good to each other, but not because the government tells you.